On this episode, I talked to Terry Tucker, and Terry is an amazingly inspirational person. We talk about basketball, his mom, hostage negotiators, cancer. Terry's had his foot and his leg amputated. We talk about love. He talked about Alexander the Great. And Terry told me at one point that he was born full, and I believe it, and so will you. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Terry, welcome to the How Did It Happen podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, Terry and I had a chance to get together by phone or like a Zoom a month or so ago, and I was just so blown away by him, and not just like his story, because you're going to be blown away by his story, but just there was like this, even though we're kind of from the same area, at least now. He grew up in the Chicago area, and I've been in Wisconsin for a long time. It felt like there was this, I don't know, this kind of like he's a guy that you feel a connection to. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to have him on today. Let me tell you a little bit about Terry before we get started, so you can get as excited as I am about this podcast. Terry Tucker is a motivational speaker, an author, and international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he also played Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. And Terry, what about the law degree? Do you have a law degree, or did you?
I went to law school. I did not finish law school. I was trying to work full time and go to law school full time, and I needed the job to pay the bills, so I did not finish.
Okay, so but he's been to law school. He's got his master's, got his undergrad. So he's been around in the educational and the academic world. So in his professional career, and this is one of the things I like most about Terry, is this guy's a reinvention architect, what I call him. He's been a marketing executive, including a stint at Wendy's early in his career. You didn't do the Where's the Beef, did you? You weren't.
I was there when that happened. I did not do that, but I was there when it happened. Yes.
Did you meet Clara?
Clara Peller, yeah, the little beautician from the south side of Chicago. I never met Clara Peller. She never came into the corporate headquarters at all, but yeah, I was there when that happened.
Okay, and if you're listening to this and you haven't heard of Clara Peller or Where's the Beef campaign at Wendy's, I would YouTube that and check it out. It's pretty funny. So he's been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, a motivational speaker, and for the past 10 years, a cancer warrior, which has resulted in the amputation of his foot in 2018 and his leg in 2020. Terry is also the author of the book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and the developer of Sustainable Excellence Membership, which we'll talk about, because I want to learn more about that for sure. He's been like, I don't know, I tried to count the number of podcasts, and thank you for putting the podcast you've been on your website, Terry. There's a lot. It's like 200 or so. And he's also been featured in a bunch of magazines like Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership. You can find Terry on all the socials. His website, as you see it scrolling across here, if you're watching, is motivationalcheck, CHECK.com. Probably most active on LinkedIn at Terry Tucker. But he's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the places you'd expect. So Terry, I start every show asking my guests the same simple question, and that is, how did it happen for you?
Yeah, it's kind of like pick one thing how did it happen for me? It really kind of happened. Like you said, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8". And as you mentioned, I played college basketball at the Citadel. I have a brother who's 6'7", who pitched for the University of Notre Dame. Another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers, the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So I sort of joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything, that was going on in front. Yeah. But our 5'8" mother was always the boss. And it started for me with my parents, because, I am not my dad was an alcoholic and he beat my mom. I came from a great family, but I came from a family that was always on the go, that was always doing, athletic stuff. And my parents, I think, modeled what a family was about. We're going to care about each other. We're going to love each other. We're going to support each other. We're going to be there for each other. And that's really how it started for me. And I think has kind of dribbled down through the years. And family, my faith, my family, and my friends, I talk about my 3 F's, are really the things that have gotten me through all the different stages of my life where I've had problems, and the people who I've wanted to share things with when things went right in my life. So I'm going to say it started with my mom and dad, and I'm very glad because of that.
So tell me more about mom. So she happens to be my height, about 5'8". And by the way, I think I mentioned this when we were talking before, but you're like our family's worst nightmare, sitting in front of us at a movie theater. It's like, oh God, we had these perfect seats, and here come these people. Yeah.
Down in front, right?
And there's nowhere to move. Yeah, down in front. Yeah. So tell me more about your mom. Like what?
Yeah, my mom is actually still living. She's 87 years old. She lives with one of my brothers in Chicago now. But, we were all athletes, even my dad, very, very athletic. And mom was sort of the support system. Mom was always at the store buying more milk and more meat and things like that to fuel our bodies as we were doing all these different things. I mean, I grew up, as a kid, you played football, and then you went into basketball season, and then you went into baseball season. And I ran track in the summer just to stay in shape for basketball season. So we were always out of the house, always doing stuff. And my dad traveled a lot. My dad actually worked for McDonald's. I know it's kind of coincidental. I ended up working for Wendy's. My dad worked for McDonald's when we lived in Chicago, and he was in real estate. So he was traveling a great deal. So in addition to, everything else that was going on, mom would stay up late and, make sure the uniforms were clean, and we had, the lunches packed for school, and she would get up in the morning. And my freshman year in high school, I had to take Latin as a class. And every day our Latin teacher gave us 10 words we had to memorize and have a quiz on. And so mom was always at the bus stop, quizzing me on these words. My brothers will tell you, it's like mom was like, you don't know these words. I'm like, Mom, I'm doing the best I can. I'm practicing basketball. I'm coming home at 8 o'clock, eating dinner, trying to study, go to bed, and get up at 5 in the morning to hit the bus. So mom was, I don't think we appreciated her as much as we do now as adults, what she did for us. She's kind of the unsung hero of the success that my brothers and I have had.
And you mentioned your high school, and I noticed on your LinkedIn profile that you list your high school, which I do, and many people don't. So anytime I find that, I want to ask someone why you felt like it was important to put your high school on your LinkedIn profile.
Well, a couple of things. My brother, my middle brother, the one who was drafted by the Cavaliers in the NBA, has been the principal, and for the last 3 years now, the president of Marist High School in Chicago. I think he's the longest tenured administrator of all the Marist schools around the world. So I also got an incredibly great education from that school. And what? I moved to Chicago after my freshman year in high school. My freshman year was at St. Charles in Columbus, Ohio. And so the last 3 years were at Marist. And I can't say enough about it. It was just a great school with great teachers, learned a lot. It was a fun time in my life. And so I certainly want to give them a shout out and say, hey, thanks for what you did for me to get me where I am.
Okay, got it. And your dad was Ray Kroc's real estate man? Is that like he was finding the location?
Actually, my dad started out as the regional real estate director in Columbus. That's where we live. And then was promoted to national director of real estate. Yeah, knew Ray Kroc. When they were in Columbus, Ray Kroc used to send a company jet to get my parents and some other people and fly them to the Rose Bowl, because most years Ohio State was playing usually USC in the Rose Bowl. And so they would go out there. And Kroc was one of those guys that I remember he had different properties around the United States, some in Arizona, some in Florida. And any McDonald's employee, you could be, working a register in Minneapolis. And if one of the, you wanted to get the condo for a week, if you signed up for it, nobody else did, you got that condo. And all you had to do was get yourself to those properties, and they were totally, self-included. You had to buy the groceries, but there was a car there. There was a place to stay. They were beautiful. And Kroc was just that kind of guy. I mean, he took care of his employees. He was a very demanding individual, but he certainly took care of his employees.
Huh. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that story about him. So were you the enemy when you went to work at Wendy's, like with your dad? Was there like?
I wasn't actually. Nepotism was alive and well in our family. My dad had just lost his mother, and it's funny because Dave Thomas and Bob Barney. Dave Thomas started Wendy's, and Bob Barney was the president. Flew into Chicago, and my dad met them on their corporate jet, and they offered him the position of vice president of engineering, construction, and purchasing at Wendy's. And we had lived in Columbus before. Wendy's is in the suburbs of Columbus. And I think my dad just needed a change. He was very close to his mother. He was an only child. And so he took that job. And I was lucky enough, to get a job in the marketing department, which actually ended up being good because he got cancer right after I started at Wendy's. So I was able to kind of help him at the office, get him into the office, get him home at night and stuff like that when he got really sick.
Okay. And this whole underachieving family that you come from, I'm wondering for you, and maybe you can speak for your brothers, or maybe you can't, but you play Division I, your brother plays Division I. Well, one basketball, one baseball, and two basketball,
one baseball.
Yeah. So when you get out of that, were you thinking like, you could go pro, or when did the real world hit you? And not to say that being a really good athlete isn't real world, but when did that hit you? And what were you thinking your path might be, Terry, and versus what it was, and maybe your brothers as well? I'm just sort of interested in the mindset going on in your family.
Yeah. I mean, I knew early on I would never make professionally. I ended up having 3 knee surgeries in high school. So it's amazing that I even was able to play Division I basketball. And I had a 4th one before my senior year in college. So I was looking, as you said, what's my next career move? What path am I going down? And my grandfather had been a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954, and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, but my dad was an infant at the time, and he always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. I mean, let's face it, trauma medicine in 1933 was a whole lot different than trauma medicine today. So when I was expressing an interest in going into law enforcement, my father was absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That was not what I felt my purpose or my passion was. So when I graduated, I had a choice. I could say, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail. I'm going to go into law enforcement. Or out of love and respect for you, I will go into business. So now if you look at my resume, it makes a little bit more sense that my first 2 jobs were in business because I did that for my father. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away, and then.
Hey everyone, if you like what I'm doing with this podcast and want to participate in more of the things I'm thinking about and exploring, subscribe to my newsletter today. It's super simple. Just go to MikeMalatesta.com right now, put in your email, and you will get the very next issue. It's short, thoughtful, and designed to inspire, activate, and maximize the greatness in you.
Followed my own dreams. And my brothers my brothers started out in different jobs. The one who's been the president emeritus, the principal emeritus, started out in sales and then got an opportunity to go into education, liked it, liked coaching, liked teaching, and then got into administration and has been there for a long time and has done a great job. My other brother is a basketball coach and a guidance counselor at Barrington High School on the north side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So, I think that we like to educate. We like to help people. We like to make a difference in the world, and not that there's anything wrong with making a lot of money and things like that and starting your own business. I've certainly done that, but it's been more about what we can give back, not so much what we can do to fill ourselves up.
And was that really the thing that made you revisit being a police officer? Was your dad passing away and or was there something else going on, Terry, that?
It was really, it was my passion. I mean, I learned a lot at Wendy's. I learned a lot being a hospital administrator, but it just wasn't the thing that got me up in the morning. I couldn't wait to go to work. When I was a police officer, I couldn't wait to go to work. It's like, what's going to happen today? It was always something different. It was always something new. It was being able to talk to people. And from time to time, I have people, not so much anymore because law enforcement isn't a job that most people want to get into anymore. But people will, ask me, what do I need to do to be a good cop? And I always tell them, put your devices down, go out on the street, talk to the homeless guy, go up to the penthouse, talk to that person. If you can talk to people, you will be good as a police officer. If you can't, you're just going to be frustrated by the fact that, what people say, what they don't say, and how they say it. And if you can understand those nuances, and that applies not just to law enforcement, I think that applies, to business or education or any field that you're in, the ability to communicate and communicate effectively.
Yeah. And get to know people before there's a stressful situation. Right? Like I would think as a police officer, the better you know people before something goes wrong, the better you're going to be able to manage the situation and deal with the person, right? Because it seems like that's what you see so much now, at least the stuff that goes viral and all, is the police officers show up on a situation that they're unprepared for, and it's an aggressive situation. It's not like yo, hey, how you doing, man? It's like it's aggressive, and you don't know the person. If you don't know the person, what else can you do except be aggressive? That's like human nature. It seems like, but so what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a good beat officer, if you know the people in the area that you patrol, and before the other thing I did in law enforcement is I was an undercover narcotics investigator in addition to being a SWAT negotiator. But for about 5 years after I got out of the academy, I ran a beat. I ran an area in a marked car in uniform, and a good beat person knows the people on their beat. And law enforcement, like business, the 80-20 rule applies. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Well, law enforcement, 80% of the crime is committed by 20% of the individuals. So you know who those people are. You know where they live. You know where their mothers live. You know where their baby mamas live. You know that stuff. So when somebody says, hey, we're looking for a guy and it matches his description. Oh, yeah, that's Peanut, or that's whatever it is. Well, he lives here and his mom lives there and stuff like that. So you can assist people, if he's wanted for a homicide, if he's wanted for a robbery or something like that, and detectives are looking for him, you can help with that. So you're absolutely right. It helps to know the people, and it helps to just get out and talk to the dope boys on the corner and stuff like that. It's like, hey, I'm not here to arrest you or anything. Just what's going on? Tell me about that. Because now you're human to them, and now they are human to me. It's not just that's a bad guy. And so, yeah, if developing relationships, developing trust in any kind of organization and any kind of job is important, and probably equally important in law enforcement as well.
And I feel like listening to you, I feel like it had to be maybe even more of a challenge for you because it's, when you're 6'8", you don't show up. And by the way, I don't know how you become an undercover 6'8".
I'm glad you picked up on that.
But so you figure out a way to get small, I guess. But yeah, I mean, just coming onto the scene, just look at you and people I'm sure were intimidated, right? It's just kind of natural. Like, this is a big dude.
Yeah. I mean, I was 6'8", 240 pounds. You put the hat on me, you put all the gear on me, and, very few people wanted to try me just because you're right. I was an imposing figure. And I ran with a partner who was in the academy with me for a number of years. And it was a woman, and she was pretty petite, but she also had a black belt in karate and a master's degree in counseling. And she was as tough as nails. But, her dad used to always say, when the bullets start flying, Kim, you hide behind Terry, So.
Okay. Well, hopefully that didn't happen. She didn't need to do that. Um, so you became a SWAT team hostage negotiator. That's like, it seems like hostage negotiators are like the thing. If you're a hostage negotiator, people want to listen to you, and you've got these, tremendous experiences. What made you want to do that? And tell us a story or two about it.
Sure. So, SWAT on most city or county law enforcement agencies, they're usually the best officers. They get the best training, they get the best equipment. And I've always wanted to be in my life associated with the best. And so when there was an opening on the negotiating portion of SWAT, I put in for it. And for those who don't understand how SWAT's divided up, it's usually a tactical team and a negotiating team. And the tactical people are the ones with all the guns and the toys and all that kind of stuff. And the negotiators are the ones who, if they do their job, prevent the tactical team from using all their guns and toys and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes they're happy with us, sometimes they're not. But our job was to basically try to solve a problem that maybe has been festering for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and comes to a head on a particular day or time. It always seems like it came to a head, sort of in the middle of the night kind of thing. I'll tell you a couple stories. This is totally an atypical negotiation. It never went this way other than this one. And it's kind of a funny story. I happened to be working that night. I got to the scene fairly quickly, and I asked the uniform officers, what's the deal? It's like, he's drunk. He's barricaded himself in his house with a gun and his wife. Like, okay, do you have him on the phone? Yes, we do. Let me talk to him. So I started talking to him. And one of the things about negotiating, the same way if you think about a relationship between a parent and child, a husband and wife, a boss or subordinate, you have to develop trust with the individual. And sometimes that takes hours to do. So you don't usually ask early on in the negotiation for the person to come out or to let a hostage go or something like that. But so I'm talking to this guy, and I just had a feeling. So I said to him, what would it take for you to come out? And there was like a long pause at the other end of the phone. And then I hear, give me a beer. And I was like, if I gave you a beer, do I have your word that you would let your wife go and you would come out? He said, do I have your word I could drink it? I said, you have my word you could drink it. Do I have your word you will let your wife go and come out? He said, yeah. So I gave one of the officers $5. I said, go down to the store, buy a beer. The tactical team put it on the front porch, and I called them back. I said, your beer's on the front porch, but you don't get it until your wife comes out. You come out with your hands up. He said, do I still have your word that I can drink it? I said, you have my word. All of a sudden, the front door flies open. Here comes his wife. Here he comes with his hands up. We handcuff him, let him drink his beer, and off to jail he goes. And the thing about that is, it's a funny story. And like I said, totally atypical of what we did. But the important thing about that is that he trusted me. And I never lied to him. That's one thing we never did as a negotiator. We never lied. We had people say to us, hey, I'll come out, but you got to promise me I'm not going to go to jail. And we would have to say, well, when you come out, you are going to go to jail. And then we would try to deflect the conversation into something more positive. So that was one atypical negotiation. This other one is a little more serious. This is a gentleman who wanted to commit suicide. And it started probably at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he cut his wrist, and that didn't work for him. And for some reason, he thought it was a good idea to turn the gas on his oven, turn his gas on and stick his head in the oven. Well, that didn't work either. Well, then he called a family member and said, hey, I've got a gun now. I'm gonna kill myself. Well, the family member called the police, and we had surrounded the house, and I was talking to him. It's probably 3 o'clock in the morning now. And finally, he's like, Terry, I just want to come out. I'm like, okay, do that. I said, put the gun down, come out. I'll come down to the scene, and we'll talk face to face. And he's like, okay, I'd like that. I said, but don't hang up the phone. Bring the phone with you. Well, he hangs up the phone, which is not uncommon because we're conditioned that when a conversation is over to hang it up. About 20 seconds later, one of the tactical officers comes on the radio and says, we heard a gunshot. I thought, oh my God, you didn't shoot yourself. He did. Shot himself in the head, but he shot himself at an angle that the bullet went in on his temple here, underneath his skin, around his skull, and came out the other side. Never penetrated his skull, never got to his brain. Now, an incredibly bloody scene because head wounds bleed more than most other wounds. But that was a situation where I always say, when it's your time, your time. That was God's way of saying, nope, not your time yet. We don't want you up here 3 times in one night. So that was a big part of it. But again, developing that trust. And I always talk about, people used to say, oh, great job, you talked somebody out. We didn't really talk people out. We listened people out. And, I wrote a chapter in my book about the importance of listening. And people are like, well, of course, everybody listens. People don't. I talk about listening to understand versus listening to reply. It's like, hurry up, Mike, say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in versus, oh, I hear what you're saying, Mike. I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but help me understand where you're coming from. That's listening to understand. And that's not something we're very good at, I think, all around the world at this point in time.
I think you're right. It's definitely a struggle. I struggle with it, but I always think that so often people are like, they feel like if they don't interrupt you, they've listened, but they're still, waiting for you to stop so that they can come back with whatever they want to come back with, or they're just bored and don't listen. They're just so concerned about something else. Both of those stories, though, it struck me. Well, a few things struck me. One, you said, I'll come down to the scene. So obviously these were both taking place by phone, but where are you in proximity to what's happening? Can you see what's happening, or are you, and how important is that?
Not usually. Sometimes we would negotiate people, we'd get a tip that a homicide suspect was holed up in an apartment and stuff like that. So we'd surround the building. We would put up sometimes ballistic blankets on the walls. We would be outside the apartment. Ballistic blankets just stop bullets. So if somebody started to shoot through the wall in the apartment, they would not come through and get us. And we would negotiate through a door. I never in my career, if I can remember, I never negotiated with anybody face to face. It was usually over a phone. Sometimes we were in a vehicle. Sometimes we bring the command center out, which is kind of like a mobile home, and we would negotiate, in that. We'd use a throw phone it's been a while since I've done this. And, that's when most people had landlines. We had a group that was attached with the negotiators that were a technical group. They would take down your landline. So they'd call the phone company. They had a special relationship, special code with the phone company, and take down your landline phone so that you could only, you couldn't call somebody. You couldn't call. And that was a big thing as a negotiator. Yes, there was a primary person talking to the individual, but sitting right next to you was another negotiator listening to what was going on. And then there's 4 or 5 other negotiators doing what I used to call working the crowd. So, trying to gather intelligence. Why are we here? Why did this happen? How did this start? So as a primary, you may get a note from your secondary that said, don't talk about his mother. Because what started this is he had a big fight with his mother. And sometimes people would be like, I just want to talk to my mother. And we were very cautious about letting people talk to other people just, without having rehearsed them. Because a lot of times, I want to talk to my mother because as soon as I talk to my mother, I'm going to kill myself. So we're like, no, you're not talking to your mom, or you're not talking to your wife or your spouse or whatever. So that was a big part of it, listening. And the other part that was important was silence, the way we used silence. So, we would ask them a question, let them burn off a lot of that energy, and then they'd stop talking. And we don't like silence as human beings. We like to fill that void, but we would have to just not say anything. And that gets uncomfortable. And then they start talking again, which is exactly what we wanted. And then finally, I'll just end with this. Negotiating was so exhausting because of the emotional part of it. So if I'm talking to you, Mike, and you're ranting and raving and yelling and screaming, what I'm going to do is I'm going to parrot back what you said to me, and I'm going to attach an emotion to it. But if I say, gee, Mike, you seem a little upset, I've totally missed what you're saying. You've got to get down in the mud. You've got to get down in the weeds with these people and say, gee, Mike, you're pissed as hell at your wife or whatever. And, oh, yeah, Terry understands what I'm saying. And then we would ask them what and how questions, because now they're engaged in how we're going to get you out. You don't know it, but by me asking you those questions, now I'm helping you brainstorm how this is going to end. Why questions were a little more accusatory. They sound like, oh, you didn't like what I did. So we kind of stayed away. We used them from time to time, but we stayed away from why questions. We asked how and what questions to engage you, to help me get you out safely. And about 90% of the time we did that, we got people out safely. But about 10% of the time, the people decided, you know what, I'm not going back to prison, or I'm not going to jail. And they would choose to end their life. And while that was always tragic, I never lost any sleep over it. And I don't mean to sound callous with that. But the reason I didn't was because I knew I did the best I could. I had great training. I worked with people. And let's face it, that would be like me saying to you, Mike, all right, this problem's been festering with your neighbor for 40 years. Go over there and solve that.
Yeah.
It's just not realistic.
Hey, everybody, just a quick pause here to let you know how much I appreciate that you've made time for my podcast. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one today. Leave a review and tell a friend. Now, let's get back to the show. Right. Or don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about it. Sure. And the story with the guy with the beer struck me so much as like people get themselves into something and they have no idea why.
Right.
Right. Like I'm going to take my wife hostage or whatever. Why? I don't know. Just because I'm kind of pissed off right now. So I'm going to do that. Well, what are you going to, what's the end game on that? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I guess it's a beer.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to ask.
The game is give me a beer.
Yeah. I don't know what else to ask for. So I guess I'll ask for a beer. And so as I understand it, you were a police officer doing this work until you moved from Ohio to Texas. Is that right? What was the reason for that, and where did that lead you?
I mean, my wife has always been the primary breadwinner in our family. She lost her job in Cincinnati, was not able to find another one, found one in Texas. And so we needed to move. And while I felt that was, law enforcement was my passion, my family was, again, going back to what my parents taught us, my family was more important. So it was like, okay, I'll find something else to do. I have education, I have experience. And so I started a school security consulting business. And I worked with private independent schools around the United States to write their policies and procedures on security, do an assessment of their campus, train their employees, and things like that. And I coached girls high school basketball. My daughter, fortunately or unfortunately, got my height and also has an NBA three-point shooting range. And so I coached her high school basketball team, and she eventually went on and played for and graduated from the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force now. So, my identity wasn't tied to being a police officer. And I did see a number of officers who had been on the job for, 30, 35, 40 years that couldn't retire because their whole identity was tied up into what they did for a job. And mine wasn't. And so I'm not going to say it was an easy transition. It wasn't. I love being a cop. But at the same time, I knew there were other things I could do. And my family was just more important than my job.
And this school security business that you started, I don't want to get too much into that because I feel like that's a whole podcast in itself, especially with what's happened. Probably over the last 20 years, it seems like, but more recently, you hear much more about horrible things that happen in schools that all have a security component to them, and probably a hostage negotiator component to them as well. Some of them, so that had to be fascinating work. But I want to just put that aside because, in the interest of time, but I have to know what the Space Force is. I'm not familiar with the Space Force.
So the Space Force is a new branch of the military that was started in President Trump's last year in office. It's my daughter can't tell me much about it. All I know is that she flies military satellites around the heavens. That's kind of the way I put it with her. It's like I said, it's a new branch. It's under the Air Force, just like the Marine Corps is under the Department of the Navy.
Okay.
So yeah, she's had some interesting experiences, most of which she can't tell us much about. So.
Okay. And by piloting, she's physically not on the satellite or on the satellite.
No,
she's doing this. Yeah.
Moving them around space.
I was like, did I miss that you could actually pilot a satellite?
I mean, she has Space Force wings. They have wings like pilots have wings and stuff like that. So Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Oh, okay. Well, I see a movie coming on
There you
that.
go.
That's interesting. So the cancer that we mentioned in the bio and that we talked about, during the first time you and I chatted, that you became aware of that when, Terry?
2012.
2012, and you were where at that time?
So we were living
You're
in Texas.
in
I
Texas.
was
Okay.
a girls' high school basketball coach at the time, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my left foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an X-ray and he said, "Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there, and I can cut it out." And he did, and he showed it to me. It was this little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it examined. And then 2 weeks later, I received that call from him. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming until
Sure.
finally he just laid it out for me. He said, "Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma." And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun and it affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with that. But this is a form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And he said, because your cancer is so rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And that started this 10-year odyssey.
And that's been quite a roller coaster. I mean, you've if I remember talking to you, you've been through periods where, thought you beat it and then it comes back, it remanifests itself. So we mentioned that you lost your foot and then most of your leg, and then now I know it's in other parts of your body, but what I'm most interested in besides your health is how it, I mean, I know we can guess how it's changed your health, but how has it changed you? Because it seems like it's changed you in a really dramatic way to, I don't know, make a bigger impact than you've probably ever thought you could. I don't want to
Oh,
put words in
absolutely.
your mouth, but yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk a lot of times in life about, finding and living our purpose or our passion or our why or whatever you want to call it. And, people always think, well, I've got to find that one thing that's my purpose. And it's been my experience in my life that my purpose has changed over my life. When I was young, it was basketball. I mean, I ate, drank, and slept basketball. And then it was law enforcement. And now it's with whatever time I have left to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation, as much love back into the world as I possibly can. And, a lot of times people are like, well, that's not real macho. And I'm like, I don't really care how macho it is. I am pretty secure in my own self that, you want to talk about love. I remember I was a huge fan growing up of a basketball coach at UCLA by the name of John Wooden.
Mm.
And I remember one day I was listening to an interview that Wooden was giving, and the reporter asked him what he thought was the most important thing that he wanted his players to learn or to understand, as players and as human beings. And Wooden was as much concerned with his players, after basketball as he was with basketball. And I'm on the edge of my seat on this interview. I got a notebook and a pencil and I'm writing stuff down. I'm like, all right, coach, come on, give me some good X's and O's here. And Wooden said the most important thing I want them to understand is love. Love for their creator, love for themselves, love for what they do, love for other people. And I was like, no, come on, give me something good. and I look back now and I'm like, no, that love is the most important thing. I mean, most of us were created in love. Most of us, hopefully love what we do. We love our families and things. But love is the most important thing in the world. And I heard that when I was a kid. I didn't understand it or internalize it and try to, basically put it back into the world until I was obviously, coming to the end of my life.
And how do you understand it now?
I realize what's important. It's not success. It's not influence. It's not money. None of that stuff matters. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Don't get me wrong, but we all think that, I've arrived. Well, you can't take any of that stuff with you at the end of your life. There's a story about Alexander the Great, probably one of the, if not the greatest conqueror in the world. And I'm not sure this story ever happened, but it's still a good story that illustrates a good point. Supposedly, as Alexander the Great was dying, he called his counselors around and said, "Look, I want you to carry out my final 3 wishes. My first wish is I only want my doctors to carry my coffin to my grave. My second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And my third wish is that I want my hands hanging outside my coffin." And one of his counselors said to him, "I mean, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the world. Those seem like kind of, again, my words, not his, goofy wishes." And he said, why do you want that?" He said, "Well, the first thing I want people to understand is that no doctor cures anybody. They just help the body to cure itself. So people should be real cognizant of the things they put into their body and the things they put into their mind." He says, "Secondly, I've spent my entire life accumulating gold and power and riches and influence, and yet none of that is coming with me beyond the grave." And then finally he said, "I want people to see my hands hanging out of my coffin because I came into this world empty-handed and I leave it pretty much the same way." So I think, it's just a good story to help us understand that, yes, it's important to have what we need in life, but it's, we're so caught up in, I need stuff because it fills me up. And the way I look at it is, I was born full. I need to give back. I need to pour out what I have to other people in the hope that it can help them live better life. And make no mistake, I don't have all the answers. I mean, I talk about my story and what I've learned. I don't tell you that that's going to make you successful or happy or healthy. Right. I tell you it's worked for me. And if it works for you, then take it. If part of it works for you, then use that and develop your own truths or realities. But I just think it's not about what we're trying to fill ourselves up with. It's about what we're able to pour ourselves out with to help other people.
Terry, that you said I was born full. That is tremendous. Like I've never heard that before. And I think I wrote it down when you said it because I'm like, I was born full. That's what's missing in so many people's lives is they think they were born empty.
Yeah. And they got to think that they've up.
Yeah. Or they think they've been depleted over time instead of knowing that they can constantly maybe refill themselves.
No, exactly. Or that what they have is enough. That the love, the kindness, the assistance, of connecting with other people, which we're just not doing today. If you don't agree with me, somehow today you're a bad person. When did that happen?
Yeah.
Why can't we, as I said, when we were talking about negotiations, okay, Mike, I hear what you're saying. I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but help me understand where you're coming from. Why can't we do that instead of, well, Mike, I don't agree with you, so you're a bad person? Why are you a bad person just because we don't agree?
Gosh. I think about that all the time, Terry. You have so many interactions in life and they're just normal interactions that humans have, like at in line at a deli or wherever. And you don't, the person next to you strike up a conversation with them, or the person that's working across the counter or wherever. And it's like, we're just two human beings, just right. And then we forget that we have that commonality, that bond together. And instead, when we hear something like you sort of reference, like that you don't agree with from the person, all of a sudden all the stuff that the 99% of the stuff that you do agree on can get, pushed out the window. And the 1% is the one thing that gets hung up on the wall. That's the difference. And it's just, I really have a hard time with that because it's sort of like getting an injury. You get an injury, you're like, oh, that hurt. Like you stub your toe or something, something. It's like, oh man, that hurt. And then, you just let it go, and because it goes away. And I think the same thing, those things would all go away if you would just let them.
Yeah. If you would focus more on our commonality and less on our differences. Yes.
I wonder what Alexander the Great and his coffin would have done to represent that. That would have been, that would have been cool.
It would have.
Hey, if you go to Terry's website, Motivational Check, he does a blog. I don't know if it's every day. It's frequent. Just a short little essay. Would you call it a blog or an essay? I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever.
But you know, I watched this video that you had up there with Jordan Peterson, and it was basically talking about truth. And then you have your 4 truths. And whenever I watch Jordan Peterson, who, by the way, if you don't know him, he's a super, I'd say he's super famous lecturer, intellectual, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what he's actually ever accomplished, I don't know what but I've seen him I've seen him do commencement speeches and stuff. And anyway, he gets going and I can hardly follow him. He starts talking so much, but in this particular one, he was talking about an interview that he did, that sort of where the interviewer tried to turn the table on him, basically to use the interview as an opportunity to make him look, I don't know if make him look bad is the right thing. But anyway, it was all about him coming back to truth. Like, if I say something that I believe to be true, then, I'm living the life that I should, and I'm completely simplifying it. But so you're interested in truth. You've got your 4 truths. I want to understand, and if you would share why truth is so important to you, and a little bit about your 4 truths.
Sure. So I think, truth, or what is important to you. We all get hung up on goals, goals, New Year's resolutions, all those kind of stuff. And why do most of those fail? And the reason I think most of them fail is because there's nothing underneath them. There's no foundation underneath those truths. And to me, that's, before you start making goals, you need to understand what your values are. What's important to you? What are you willing to die for? What is that important? What is that ingrained in you that you're willing to give your life for? And a lot of people don't. If you ask people that, they'd be, I don't know, maybe my family, maybe, they don't know what their values are. If you know what your values are, now you've got a foundation, and you can build goals and obtain those goals based on those values. So those have been incredibly important in making these 4 truths, because I look at these 4 truths, or I call these 4 truths sort of the bedrock of my soul. They're just a good place to build a quality life off of. And I'll give them to you. I have them on a Post-it note right here. I see them multiple times during the day, and they're constantly reinforced in my brain. So the first one is this: control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resolute individual. The third one I look at as more of a legacy kind of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And the fourth one: as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. So I look at those truths, as I said, as sort of the bedrock of my soul, and I make decisions off of that. Should I take this therapy? Should I get involved in this project and things like that, based on what I know is true for me and what is important to me in my life? And the other part of that, and I talk about this occasionally, is what I call my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends, because those are also incredible things that I take into account whenever I'm going to do something.
And let me ask a couple questions about those truths. So with legacy, you referenced that number 3, what you leave behind, is sort of a legacy thing. And I'm wondering, like, for you, how do you think about legacy? Is the legacy, well, let me stop there and just, how do you think about legacy for you and for everyone?
I don't, and I've been asked this question, how do you want to be remembered and things like that? I don't. I mean, I'm realistic enough to know that, probably 50 years after I'm dead, nobody's ever going to remember I was here. So it's not so much what I leave. Yes, I've written a book and that'll outlive me and things like that. But for me is, what am I, again, going back to what am I pouring out now? What am I giving of myself to the people I come in contact with? I made a very conscious decision when I got cancer that I was never going to take my misfortune out on a doctor or a nurse or a therapist or somebody that was trying to help me. And I've seen so many people do that. So many people lash out, and I know why. They're afraid, and they're not centered. They're all over the place. They're kind of like a Super Ball. They're just bouncing all over the place, and they're what's driving them is fear, the fear of the unknown. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to die and stuff like that? Yeah, okay, we're all going to die. And I think that legacy truth to me, when I found out I was going to have my leg amputated and I have these tumors in my lungs, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I go on these podcasts, or I speak in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I got some brushback from people who were like, don't you think that's kind of defeatist, planning your own funeral? And I looked at them like, well, the last time I checked, we're all going to die. Don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now.
Right.
And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die.
Just a short break here to ask you a question. Have you read my book? It's called Ownership: How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and it's available on Amazon, Audible, and everywhere else. If you're looking for inspiration that will help you unlock your greatness and potential, order or download your very own copy today.
The world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that. And the person who pushed back, I'm thinking to myself, well, so what would be better for me to leave that responsibility to somebody else when I'm done?
Yeah. I mean, I buried my father. I remember, him dying and having to go with my mother, and, how exhausted we were mentally and physically, and having to plan that funeral. I mean, when I die, one phone call, boom, it's done.
Right.
And, let my family be together and grieve or throw a party or do whatever they want to do.
And on the legacy thing, I didn't want to come across like I was asking you what you think your legacy was. I'm just curious about legacy. It's a topic that really interests me, because I feel like so many people spend a lot of their lives concerned about what people are going to think about them after they're gone. And I think to myself, that's just a lot of wasted time, because, be kind, love, all the things you've been saying, and people will think of you whatever they think of you. There's nothing you can do about what people think about you. And once you're gone, you're gone.
You're right. And we spend so much time thinking about, comparing ourselves to other people. I've even had people do it to me that are sick. It's like, well, you're suffering more than I am, or I'm suffering more. We're all on our own journey. Why are you looking at me and saying, you're worse than me or you're better than me? Deal with your journey. Don't compare yourselves. But we do that. We spend so much time saying, oh, that person has a bigger house or makes more money or drives a nicer car, so they're better than me or they're more successful. That's their journey. What's your journey?
Right.
I always tell people, why compare yourself to other people? Why not just get 1% better every day? Are you better today than you were yesterday? If you were, that's good enough. Don't worry about, am I better than the guy next to? I mean, even when we played basketball, yeah, we played against another team, but we were always really playing against ourselves. Did we get better? Are we a better team today than we were the last game we played? If we were, even if we've lost, we're moving in the right direction. So
true. And your book, Terry, came out like about 2 years ago at the time that we're recording this podcast, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. What prompted you to write the book, and why?
The why is the easier question. The why is because I was supposed to. I there's kind of that old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me to write a book. I just want to make sure, that people understand that. But I think what God does is put people in our path that start making the same suggestion over and over and over. I know that's happened to me several times in my life. And I'm smart enough now, or old enough now, whatever, or wise enough now to realize that I need to pay attention to that. So people were saying, you should write a book. You should, and I was totally against, no, I'm not an author. I'm not going to do that. I shouldn't do that. But more and more people kept doing it. The book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to Colorado with her fiance. And my wife and I had dinner with them one night. And after dinner, I said to her, I'm really excited that you're living close now and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents and live that reason. So that was one conversation. And then the second one was with a young man in college who reached out to me on social media. And he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn to not just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I thought about it for a while. And, I didn't want to give him the get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time and I was taking some notes. And, eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Two conversations. It's amazing. It just goes to show you, you never know. Like we talked earlier about people sort of, dismissing people because of something they say or whatever, but you never know a conversation you're going to have or a person you're going to meet that's just going to change everything for you. That's going to be that idea you've been looking for, or is going to be that person that you need, or the support that you've been, searching for. It's just, that's really cool. And this college, this young man in college just reached out to you out of the blue. So you didn't even know this person. You had no connection with them.
Yeah, he was attending the Citadel at the time, so there was a connection. We both went to the same school, but 35 years apart. But yeah, other than that, I had no idea who he was. So
go to Amazon right now, buy Terry's book, Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. It's got tremendous reviews, almost all 5-star reviews, which is amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you
on that. His website is motivationalcheck.com. Terry, I thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing not only your inspirational thought and mindset. I won't say story, because your story is just like everybody else's story. They're all inspirational, right? But I love that you've got this thing on your website too called Inspiring People to Lead Uncommon and Extraordinary Lives. I think that's the thing I said I was going to get to and then didn't. Sustainable Excellence Membership. Yes. Why don't you say what that is real quick before we get off? Because I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, the membership, again, people were, hey, they either read the book, heard me talk, or heard me on these podcasts, and they're like, we'd like to take that deeper. We'd like to, and I was really hesitant to do that because it was like, look, I'm still in treatment for cancer, and that's a lot of work, but eventually enough people were like, hey, we'd like to do this. Could you develop a membership around the 10 principles in your book? And so I've just started it. It's really kind of in its infancy right now. It'd be interesting to see where it goes, if it gets traction or not. But it's something for me to do again, something different that hopefully will help other people.
All right, good. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for being the person that you are. And Well, you've been on this roller coaster. I know you're still on this roller coaster. I certainly wish the best for you, as I know everyone listening does. But in the meantime, boy, oh boy, you are really making um, good use of every minute that you're here, Terry. And it's been just an honor to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, Mike, thanks for having me on. I always say it's nice people like you that allow me to come on and have a conversation with them. And hopefully that conversation makes a positive difference in somebody's life. And if it does, today's been a good day.